Daughter Piper's kindergarten graduation was supposed to be the night she wore her tiny cap and gown and felt like the most important person in the room. She'd been talking about it for 3 weeks straight. Every morning at breakfast, she would remind me exactly how many days were left. She picked the restaurant herself, pointing at the picture in a brochure my coworker left in the break room, a farm-to-table place downtown called Harvest and Stone that does a priest-friendly dinner on Friday nights. Private dining room in the back. String lights, a children's menu with macaroni shaped like stars. Instead, it became the night my brother-in-law looked across that reserved table, surrounded by 4 of his real estate buddies he had never once mentioned to me, and told me to relax and enjoy the night he had organized. He had not organized a single thing. I had made that reservation 6 weeks in advance. He just showed up. I pressed my fingers flat against the linen tablecloth and breathed through my nose. Piper was sitting 2 seats away from me, wedged between a man she had never met and a leather laptop bag someone had set in the chair next to her. Her little cap was slightly crooked. She was staring at the breadbasket like she was trying very hard not to cry. I picked up my glass of water, took one slow sip, and started making decisions. My name is Claire, and I am a licensed CPA with my own small firm. I handle quarterly filings for about 60 small business clients, 3 restaurant groups, and 1 very particular property management company that my brother-in-law has been trying to get me to audit for free for the past 2 years. I run numbers for a living. I track patterns. I notice when things do not add up. And my brother-in-law, Derek, has never once added up. Derek is my husband Marcus's younger brother by 4 years. On the surface, he is all confidence and cologne, the kind of man who announces his own entrance into a room and then waits to see if anyone noticed. He flips houses, or so he says. What he actually does is convince investors to fund renovations he manages poorly, delay every contractor, miss every deadline, and then blame the market when the margins collapse. Marcus has bailed him out twice, once for $11,000, when a flip deal fell through in 2021, once for $6,000 when Derek's lease on his office space came due and his business account had been mysteriously emptied by his own bad decisions. Both times, Derek promised to pay it back. Both times, he found a reason not to. Both times, Marcus's mother told me to be patient. She told me Derek was figuring himself out. She told me that brothers take care of brothers, and that I needed to understand the way this family worked. I understood exactly how it worked. I just refused to keep funding it. The night of Piper's graduation, Derek had been at Harvest and Stone when we arrived. Already seated. Already holding a whiskey. He had 4 men with him. I later learned they were investors he was courting for a new project, a duplex renovation in a neighborhood he had no business touching. He had looked up my reservation, charmed the hostess with some story about being family, and absorbed our private dining room into his sales pitch before Piper and I even walked through the door. When I saw the table, I stopped walking. Piper bumped into the back of my legs. She looked around me and her face did this thing, the small, quiet collapse that I will never stop seeing. She had spotted the star-shaped macaroni on the children's menu from the car. She had told me that morning that she wanted to sit at the head of the table because graduates always sit at the head. Someone's sport coat was draped over that chair. Derek stood up when he saw me. He spread his arms wide like he was welcoming me into his event. Claire, perfect timing. I told the guys this place was incredible. You've got great taste. He glanced down at Piper. Hey kiddo, congrats on finishing school. He said it the way adults talk to children when they have already moved on in their heads. Then he turned back to his investors and kept talking. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. He could feel what was happening inside me. He knows that particular silence. One of Derek's associates, a man in a quarter-zip pullover who introduced himself as Brock, leaned over and asked if I was in real estate too. I told him I was a CPA. He said, "Oh nice, so you do Derek's books?" I said no. I excused myself and walked to the host stand. The woman at the front was named Adrian. I had spoken to her when I made the reservation, and again when I called to confirm the children's menu. She recognized me immediately. I kept my voice very even. I told her that the private room had been overrun by people who were not on my reservation and that I needed to make a change. I told her I needed the room reset for my party only, myself, my husband, my daughter, and my parents, who were arriving in 15 minutes. I told her that the other table, whatever they ordered, whatever they consumed, was a completely separate check, and that nothing, not a bread roll, not a glass of water, was to be added to my account. Adrian looked toward the back room. She looked at me. She said, "Of course, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Claire. Give me 5 minutes." I thanked her and went back to collect my daughter. I crouched down in front of Piper, right there in the entrance hallway, next to the coat rack. I straightened her little cap. I told her that we were getting our own special table, and that she was absolutely sitting at the head. She studied my face for a second, the way kids do when they are deciding whether to believe you. Then she said, "Will there still be star macaroni?" I told her there would absolutely still be star macaroni. Adrian moved us to a round table near the back window that overlooked the restaurant's small herb garden. String lights outside, candles on the table. She had the staff bring over the balloon bouquet I had pre-ordered and tie it to the back of Piper's chair. My parents arrived 7 minutes later, my mom carrying a small sheet cake she had decorated herself with purple frosting and a fondant graduation cap. For the first time that evening, Piper looked like the guest of honor. I sat back in my chair and listened to my daughter explain the entire plot of her kindergarten graduation ceremony to my father, who asked 3 follow-up questions and pretended to be astonished by each answer. Marcus reached under the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. In the private room, Derek was still performing. I know this because the server rotation occasionally sent someone past our table who had also been through the back, and the reports were consistent. Derek had ordered for the whole group 2 appetizer boards, a charcuterie platter, 4 entrees, a bottle of Nava Cab, and then a second bottle when that one ran low. He was explaining his new duplex project in the animated way he does when he is trying to make a number sound better than it is. His investors were nodding in the polite way that people nod when they have not yet decided whether to run. None of them knew the check was entirely theirs. At 8:45, I heard Derek's voice from across the restaurant. Not words at first, just the tone. That particular register he uses when something has not gone the way he expected. Then louder, with words. Marcus looked at me. I looked at the herb garden. Derek appeared in the entrance of the dining room. He had the check folder in one hand and his phone in the other. He spotted me across the room and walked over with the specific energy of a man who believes he is about to resolve a misunderstanding. "Claire." He set the folder on the edge of our table, next to the birthday cake. "There's been some mix-up with the bill. They're saying my food is on a different check." "That's right," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Your food is on a different check. Your table is a separate reservation." He lowered his voice, which Barrick means dropping from a 9 to a 7. "I'm in the middle of a meeting. I have clients back there. This is not the time." "I agree," I said. "This is Piper's graduation dinner. It wasn't the time for your meeting either, but here we are." He looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at the herb garden too. Derek picked up the folder and opened it. I did not see the total, but I watched his expression do the math. He had not been expecting to pay for 4 investors, 2 bottles of Napa Cab, and a charcuterie spread he had ordered to impress people. He leaned in closer. "You could have just told me to leave. I would have found somewhere else." "You knew the reservation was mine," I said. "You could have told me you were coming." He did not have an answer for that. He stood there for a moment, with the folder in his hand, and then he went back to his table. His investors left separately. I noticed because 3 of them passed our table on the way out, and none of them stopped. One of them, the man in the quarter zip, made very brief eye contact with me, and then looked away. That particular look is one I recognize. It is the look of someone who just watched a deal unravel in real time and is trying to figure out how to quietly step back from it. Derek came out of the private room 12 minutes later with the look of a man who has just paid a bill he was not prepared for. He stopped at the edge of our table. He looked at the balloon bouquet, the empty cake plate, the purple frosting still on Piper's upper lip. He said, "I hope you're happy." I looked at my daughter, who was showing my father how to fold a napkin into a swan, a skill she had apparently learned that morning from a YouTube video. "I really am," I said. He left without saying goodbye to Marcus. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, my mother-in-law called. She had heard Derek's version, which I can summarize as follows. Claire caused a scene at a family dinner, humiliated him in front of professional associates, and refused to act like family. She wanted me to understand how much damage I had done. I let her finish. She is a thorough woman when she has a grievance. Then I said, "He took over a reservation I made 6 weeks in advance, on my daughter's graduation night, without telling me, and filled the room with business contacts. I moved my family to a different table and asked the restaurant to keep the checks separate. That's what happened. She said, "You could have just let it go," I said. He put his jacket on Piper's chair. She was quiet for a moment. I said, "She's 5. She'd been counting down for 3 weeks. She wanted to sit at the head of the table because she was the graduate. And she got there, by the way. We had a lovely dinner. I just didn't pay for his." My mother-in-law said some more things after that. I listened to most of them. When she was done, I told her I loved her and that I hoped we could see each other soon, and I meant both of those things. We hung up on reasonably civil terms. What I did not tell her, because it was not the right moment, was that the next part had already started. When Derek left Harvest and Stone that night, his check was $612. He paid it. I later confirmed this because Adrian mentioned it when I called to leave a Yelp review, but he paid it on a card that I recognized from a conversation Marcus and I had the previous winter. It was the card tied to a joint account he and Marcus had opened years ago to split the mortgage on a rental property they co-owned and eventually sold. Marcus thought that account had been closed. It had not been closed. The card had a $2,000 limit, and Derek had apparently kept it active and been using it periodically. I am a CPA. I found this out in under 40 minutes using account statements Marcus had kept in the shared Google Drive folder. I presented this to Marcus on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee and a printed spreadsheet. He sat at the kitchen table and read through it twice. He is a quiet man when he is processing something. He went through the statements page by page, and by the end, he had that look. Not angry exactly, more like someone who has just seen a familiar road from a different angle and cannot understand how they never noticed the sign. He called Derek that afternoon and told him the card was being canceled and that he expected the outstanding balance reimbursed within 30 days. He also told Derek that the $11,000 and the $6,000 from previous loans were not being forgiven. They were being documented and added to a formal repayment agreement that Marcus had asked me to draft. Derek called me 3 days later. I let it go to voicemail. He left a 4-minute message. The highlights were, I had turned Marcus against him. I had always had it out for him. I was destroying his family. And also I should have just been grateful he came to Piper's dinner because he took time out of a busy schedule to be there. I saved the voicemail. Then I drafted the repayment agreement. It took Derek about 3 weeks to realize that Marcus was not going to soften on this one. He had always been able to outlast Marcus's frustration before. Just wait long enough for guilt to replace anger. But I managed schedules for a living, and the guilt schedule had been canceled indefinitely. His new investors did not move forward with the duplex project. I do not know exactly why. I have theories, but I do not know. What I do know is that Derek listed the project on a real estate crowdfunding platform 6 weeks later, which tells you something about the state of the pitch. My mother-in-law stopped bringing up the restaurant incident after about a month. I think she ran the numbers on it eventually, in her own way, and arrived at a number she did not like. What I want to tell you, because I know what you are thinking right now, I know some of you are watching this with your arms crossed thinking, why did you let it go on this long? Why did you keep lending him money? Why didn't Marcus shut this down after the first $11,000? Here's the real answer, and I am not going to dress it up. When someone is family, you extend grace. That's a real thing. It's not weakness, it's love. You give them the benefit of the doubt because you've seen them in moments that reminded you they are a full human being, not just a pattern. Derek, at his best, shows up. He brought Marcus soup when Marcus had his appendix out. He built Piper a wooden step stool for the bathroom sink when she was 2 and couldn't reach the faucet. He is not entirely a villain. He is a person who has never been asked to absorb the consequences of his own choices, and so he never learned how. The problem is that mercy without a limit is not mercy. It is a system. And the system was running entirely on Marcus's goodwill and my silence. And it was going to keep running until one of us broke. I did not break. I just stopped being silent. Behavioral economists have a name for what happens when you keep extending grace to someone who keeps burning it. They call it the escalation of commitment. The more you've already invested, the harder it becomes to stop, because stopping means admitting that all the previous investments were mistakes. You keep going because the alternative is acknowledging the loss. Derek understood this intuitively, even if he couldn't name it. Every time we helped him, he knew we were a little more locked in. What he did not count on was the graduation dinner. He made it too visible. He made it about Piper, who was 5 years old and had been counting down the days and wanted to sit at the head of the table. He gave me something I could not rationalize or defer or absorb quietly. You cannot expense a 5-year-old's tears. The repayment agreement Derek signed covers $17,000 at $300 a month. He has made 2 payments. I have the automatic transfer records in a folder on my desktop labeled with Piper's name, because that is where the money is going, straight into a 529 college savings account I opened for her the week after the restaurant. $612, paid by Derek, for a dinner he tried to put on my card, sitting in my daughter's future. I kept the children's menu. Piper asked me to. She colored in the star-shaped macaroni with a purple crayon on the drive home. It is on our refrigerator right now, under a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Our house is different now. Not dramatically different. Not movie different. Just lighter. We had Marcus's work friends over for a cookout last month, and nobody asked Marcus to make a call on Derek's behalf, and nobody talked about a deal they needed help financing. And when the evening was over, I did not lie awake adding up the cost of things. I want to tell you 3 things, because I think you came here today with something specific sitting in your chest. First, a family title is not a debt instrument. Brother-in-law, sister, cousin, parent. None of those words mean you owe someone a blank check on your time, your money, or your child's special nights. Love is not a payment plan. Second, the quietest power move is the one that doesn't announce itself. I didn't make a scene at that restaurant. I walked to the host stand and had a calm conversation. Derek made the scene. That distinction matters. Not because I care about looking composed, but because the composed person is the one who gets to decide what happens next. Third, sometimes the person who needs to change is not the one who needs your patience. They need your limit. A real limit, with a real consequence attached. Not a warning. Not a conversation where you explain your feelings and then let things go back to normal. A line that stays where you drew it. That $600 dinner cost Derek more than any amount of money I could have made him repay by writing a check. It cost him the system. It cost him the assumption that I would always absorb the overflow. Did it cost me something too? Yes. It cost me the version of this family, where I was the good daughter-in-law who kept the peace. That version was not as comfortable as it looked from the outside. I was the one paying for it. I'd rather pay for star-shaped macaroni. If you have ever sat at a table that was supposed to be yours and watched someone take it over and smiled through it because you did not know another way, I want you to know that the host stand is right there. You can walk to it any time. You can ask for a separate check. You can take your daughter and the balloon bouquet you pre-ordered and the sheet cake someone who loves you stayed up late to decorate, and you can move to the table by the window, the one with the string lights, the one where she gets to sit at the head. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to separate the check on someone in your own family? Have you ever drawn a line and then actually held it? Because I know how hard that is. I know what it costs. And I think you telling your story might be the thing that gives somebody else permission to tell theirs. I'm Claire. My accounts are in order, and I'll see you in the next one. I have thought about that night a lot since it happened. Not with anger anymore. The anger burned off pretty quickly once I saw Piper coloring in her star-shaped macaroni with a purple crayon on the drive home, completely unbothered, completely happy. What I think about now is the sequence of it, how one thing led to another, not because I planned it that way, but because I finally stopped absorbing the consequences of someone else's choices. Derek did not end up in the position he is in because I separated the check. He ended up there because he spent years making decisions that only worked as long as someone else was quietly cleaning up behind him. The dinner was just the first time the cleanup didn't happen. That's all I did. I just didn't clean it up. There's something I want to say about what it actually takes to hold a line, because I think people make it sound simpler than it is. Everybody says set boundaries. Everybody says know your worth. But what nobody tells you is that holding a limit with someone you love or someone you used to trust costs something real. It costs you the comfortable fiction that if you just stay patient a little longer, they will eventually figure it out on their own. I genuinely wanted Derek to figure it out. I would have preferred that version of the story. But wanting someone to change and funding their refusal to change are 2 completely different things, and for a long time I was doing both simultaneously and calling it grace. What I actually had was a system, and systems persist until someone decides to stop participating. The repayment agreement is not revenge. I want to be clear about that. It is documentation. It is the thing that turns a pattern into a record, and a record into accountability. Accountability is not punishment. It is just reality with paperwork attached. Derek is capable of paying $300 a month. He is a grown man with income and a phone, and the ability to set up an automatic transfer. The only thing that was ever missing was the expectation that he would. Piper does not know any of this. She knows she sat at the head of the table. She knows there were balloons tied to her chair and star macaroni on the plate and purple frosting on her grandmother's cake. She knows that her graduation dinner was exactly what it was supposed to be. That is the whole point. Not the money, not the agreement, not the card Derek used that he shouldn't have had. All of that is just the accounting. The actual point is that my 5-year-old got her night. I think about what I would tell a younger version of myself, the one who smiled through things and absorbed the overflow and told herself it was keeping the peace. I would tell her that peace you purchase with your own silence is not peace, it is just quiet. And quiet is not the same thing as okay. The real thing, the durable thing, is what happens when you stop funding the fiction and just let reality do its job. Derek's investors didn't walk away because of me. They walked away because Derek, without a safety net, could not hold the pitch together. That was always going to happen. I just stopped being the safety net. Piper's 529 has 2 contributions in it now, both from Derek, both automatic. I think that is the most honest ending I have.